Hi everyone, just a quick devlog update from me. I think I find a good, viable and optimized way of creating a huge forest environment, meaning I can create a large open world forest with, let's say, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of foliage elements like cuttable trees, mineable rocks, or small pickup items scattered throughout the forest. So for example, feathers or small sticks and stones, berries, mushrooms, etc. Now, I'm not gonna go over specifically all the blueprint and how it goes, but I will showcase what I do, and then you can get the idea and implement it into your own project. Because obviously it's going to depend on your project, how you do the mineable rocks resource, what is your tree cutting resource, what is your inventory. I'm just going to show you my logic of how I am handling this stuff, so you can get an idea and maybe implement it into your own project. So how I do is going to be split into two main parts. The first part is that going to be mineable rocks and is going to be cuttable trees. Now, mineable rocks and cuttable trees are going to be handled exactly the same way, which is going to be with transform. So what I do is when I stand here, I'm going to swing my axe, which is going to cut down a line trace, rather I call it sphere trace, like a long, it's a line trace but a wide, it almost looks like a long sphere, which is going to hit the tree. The tree, which is a static mesh component, this is not an actor, this is an instant static mesh component, is going to be transformed. So the transform going to be moved over there, and then an actor will be spawned instead of it. So if I do like this, as you can see, we hit it, there is the underlying static mesh itself, which is moved over there, and now this is an actor, so I can actually cut down the tree if I want to. Now, if I don't hit the tree for, let's say, 10, 20, whatever seconds, it's going to literally take the underlying static mesh, which is right now over there, that is the static mesh, and it's going to remove this actor, and it's going to transform it back, essentially replacing the actor back into a static mesh. And this is exactly the same logic that I have with the tree. So if I stand here for a little bit while, as you can see, it swapped it back. Now this is again a static mesh. So if I stand here and not even hitting it just like this, and I cast it, now it swapped it. So now the underlying static mesh is there, and this is an actor. Same with the rock. So if I stand here and I don't even need to hit it, I just do like this. You see the rock is now over there. And this one is actually an actor, so I can literally hit the rock and I can remove the rock and mine it and etc. because the underlying static mesh is moved there. And once the respawn timer and everything is complete, it's going to be moved back here. So that's how I handle it for the mineable rocks and the cuttable trees. I simply take the underlying static mesh, I move it there, and then I spawn the actor. And once I mined it and got the delay timer, respawn timer, inactivity or proximity timer, I simply take the underlying static mesh, move it back, remove the actor, and that's it done. Now, why it's good is because when I run through the forest, I'm not swapping items. So I can run through my whole forest, nothing is swapped into actors. As you can see, the actor count on the right side of my monitor, so right here, the actor count, is exactly stays 23 because I can run through the forest, nothing will be swapped into actors. Only happens when I stand here and I actually start cutting a tree. Now you can see that this is an actor, like the actor count goes up, because I needed to actually interact with it in order to make it an actor. Now this is important because most of the people who do these kind of interactable forests, what they do is they create an object channel. So inside your project settings, they create an object channel, let's say call it foliage swap, and this object channel set to block by default, they create under their BP third person character, they create a so-called foliage swap trigger, which is a sphere collision. Now what they do is this sphere collision around the character set to, I don't know, whatever they want to set it to. So for example, in this case it's 175 radius, but you can increase, decrease, whatever. So what they do is this particular sphere going to overlap with the foliage object channel. And then whenever you spawn items in the open world, like static meshes, you also overlap, but not overlap, you block the foliage swap on the particular meshes in the open world. And whenever those meshes get inside the sphere channel, meaning that the sphere channel is interacting with the static mesh, is going to swap it to an actor. That's what most people do, and I have to give credit to Thurston, who is a YouTuber, and I got the idea from him. That was the original kind of swap that I created or copied from him, which was simply whenever, let's say you have this sphere around the character, you're walking through the forest, you got a small, I don't know, stick, which it goes into the sphere like this, and then it's swapped over to an actor, and then you can go there, pick it up, or do whatever you want to. Same with the trees, rocks, etc. But that's not good. And why it's not good is because whenever you run through a really dense populated forest like this, and let me just open my FPS counter. So if you run through a populated forest like this, you're gonna see dropping to 40, 30, 20 because you're running through it, and by the time you go from there until the other end over there, within 15 seconds you're going to add 70 actors. Like, you're going to realistically first remove 70 instances. Remove instance is a heavy task to remove, relatively heavy task to remove instance. You remove the instance, you swap into an actor, and then once it goes out from your kind of sphere, let's say you have a small delay with it, then you're swapping it back to a static mesh. So what do you do? From here, you're running onto the other end, like 25 meters. By then, you removed 70 static meshes from the instance, you added 70 actor, and then you destroyed 70 actor, and then you added the 70 static mesh instance back. So you did 280 tasks within 25 meters of running through the forest. It's impossible to maintain in a large environment. So when it's a densely populated forest, I want to run through my forest without me swapping anything to anything. If I don't interact with the foliage, I don't want it to swap to anything. And that's why I created in my world when I go to the BP third person character, what I did is a simple sphere trace by channel, and the sphere trace by channel, I do the trace channel to be a visibility channel. And then from the third person or first person camera, whatever you decide how to do it, the sphere is going to directly hit the tree, and the tree itself, if I go here, instance foliage, the tree itself, which is right here, this one, going to have in the collision sets, so let me just go to the collision, custom collision, is going to have the, where is it? The visibility in a block. So it's going to interact with my sphere that I'm casting from the third person character. And when I do that, that's where the swap happens. And the swap itself is the same that Thurston did on YouTube. So it's a data table struct, and then you just decide if it's a choppable tree or a mineable rock, and you act accordingly, and you're swapping it over to an actor, etc. Whenever it's done, you swapped into an actor and you mined it, it did whatever you want to do. What I do is the underlying, actually when you swap it to an actor, I take the update instance transform. So instead of removing the instance, or remove instance, so you swap into an actor, so you need to remove the underlying instance, but instead of that, what I do is I do update instance transform, and I just take the tree, and whenever I hit this tree, the underlying static mesh will be placed somewhere outside there. That's the cool part about it, is because I do not need to add or remove the instance. When I hit the tree, the underlying static mesh will be moved from the instance, like let's say this instance 21 will be removed from here and place it somewhere outside there. And I can work with the actor, I can destroy it, mine it, etc., whatever, and after a short delay or whatever, a respawn time, I not spawn it, but actually just move the transfer back in and destroy the actor. So that's kind of how I deal with the mineable rocks and the cuttable trees. Now comes the tricky part, which is the actual interactable foliage, which is a way more kind of complicated stuff to deal with, and let me explain why it is. Now when it comes to the actual small resources, meaning that anything that's scattered throughout the forest, like small rocks, small sticks, mushroom berries, feathers, etc., so the small items which I like to call pickup items, that's my actual interactive foliage, not the trees or rocks. What I need to do there is that, again, I cannot just have it a sphere, and whenever it goes inside the sphere I swap it, because by the time I run from here until the end over there, I'm going to have in a dense populated forest like 100 items swapped over and back and forth, which is not a viable option. So what I was thinking about is I started watching YouTube videos like how to approach this question, and I seen someone, a YouTube channel which is called Prismatic Dev, and I give a shout out to Charlie, who did, he does kind of these material videos, a lot of material videos. He's really good with like textures and materials and etc. And what he created is basically he said that I can, in the material itself, and let me open the material for it so I can show exactly what I mean. I can just simply add an opacity masking for any material I want to. For example, here I have this stone or so-called rock item, which has the material here, which is mrock material. And inside the opacity mask, I can just add a per instance custom data, which is going into a vertex interpolator, which goes into the opacity mask. Now, if this per instance custom data is 0, then the item is invisible. If it's 1, then the item is visible. Now, this is great because I can use this to make a particular item like this small rock visible or invisible in runtime, of course. Now, why this is great is because these small items, which I call pickup items, they do not need to have any collision, meaning that, I don't know, a feather on the ground does not need to have collision. A mushroom on the ground does not need to have collision, really, to be honest with you. Maybe you can make something like step on it, so you can steppable, like you can step on it, but you don't really need to have collision. And if you don't need to have collision, then you actually can do what I do, which is basically I have this opacity masking on the resource. So on the rock itself is going to have this opacity masking. Which going to be on runtime depending if the per instance custom data is either 1 or 0. That determines if it's visible or invisible, like I showed. And what I do is that when it comes to the actual foliage actor, or what is it called, static mesh foliage. So in the static mesh foliage, you can select the component class that you want to assign to it. So for example, right here in the instance, I can see that my first instance is a mineable rock, which has the foliage instance static mesh component, as usual. The second is a tree, which has the foliage instance static mesh component, but this third one is a rock, which has the swap foliage instance static mesh component, which I created, which is basically right here. Instead of the foliage instance static mesh, I choose the swap foliage instance, and the swap foliage instance static mesh component right here, I created this. This is going to be a child of the foliage instance static mesh component, meaning anything that the foliage instance static mesh component gets from Unreal Engine, because this is a basic C++ class from Unreal Engine. This is the class that you would select in a normal static mesh foliage. When you create like this, you select it, and this is what instances for you into the instance. Now, I created a child of that, and I called it swap foliage instance static mesh component. And in this child, what I do is at runtime, I start by the event begin play. I loop through every single item, or so-called like pickup items scattered around the forest, and I make each of them custom data value to be 1.0, meaning to be visible, because by default it's invisible. So as you can see, there's no rock on the ground, fully empty forest. But if I go hit the play button, what's going to happen? You already see that the rocks are there. So for example, you see 1, 2, 3 rocks over there. But if I go out, there's no rocks here, because in runtime I literally just assign the custom data value to 1.0, so they are making them visible in runtime. And when I make them visible in runtime, I can also do some other stuff here. I can add variables, I can declare stuff, I can do functions, I can do a whole bunch of stuff that I would do in an actor class, but I can do directly in the component class, which is literally right here. And why this is good is because what I imagined is that you have the BP third person character, okay? So the BP third person character in this case is, let me just go right there. So the BP third person character, let's say, stands over a particular rock on the ground. It's up to you how you're going to have like a little toolbox or a message box that says that press E to pick up the item. Is up to you. I'm not gonna show you what I do for that, but I'm gonna show you when you press E and you stand in a trace foundation sphere trace by channel. So it's kind of same thing like the X with the left click. I do a E key and you press the E key, it's going to cast out, but instead of casting the foliage instance static mesh component, I'm casting to the swap foliage instance static mesh component, which is the child that I created. I cast to that, and I do something similar that I did with the original swapping, but instead what I do is I'm not swapping it directly to an actor, but what I do is I actually use interfaces. So I created a so-called Foliage swap interface where I have a few functions, and I implemented it to the BP third person character, so I can send message from the third person character, meaning I hit something with the sphere trace channel, and I say, okay, what did I hit? I hit this object reference, so I declare it. I declare the hit item from the break hit result, and I'm sending the hit result itself and the object reference with a swap interface communication to here. Exactly. So interact with the foliage, event swap foliage interact. So from the BP third person character, I'm sending this message, I'm sending the object ref and a hit result. In here, which is the child of the foliage instance static mesh component, I receive the hit result, I receive the object reference, and after that, I do my whole logic, which in my logic is I'm adding pickup items, I'm adding them to the inventory. After that, what I do is instead of removing the instance, because obviously you picked up the stone, so you need to kind of, remove the instance. But instead of removing the instance, what I do is I hide. So I literally do a set custom data value. And as you seen in earlier, in the beginning, we set every single item to be set custom data value 1. But when I hide it, I set custom data value to 0. And that makes it invisible. So once I add it to my inventory, I make it invisible. So if I go into play mode, I can show you exactly. I stand over a rock, I press it, and one store given to my inventory, because the store was inside, the stone was inside this sphere channel right here. It hit it, as you can see, like this. Well, it's not like this, but no. Here, yes, it hit it. So it gave one stone into my inventory, but the stone is still here. So if I go like this, I pick it up, I pick up this, this, and this, you would think I removed all of these stones. No, the stones are still there. They are just invisible. If they would have collision, I could step on them still, even though they're invisible. But obviously they don't have collision because I removed the collision, because I don't think small rocks need collision. So basically when I do this, it's still there. The stone itself, the rock itself, never moved anywhere. The static mesh, underlying static mesh is still there. All I did is I made it invisible with a custom data value 0. Now this is the time where you would implement your own delay logic, respawn time, I don't know, proximity respawn, whatever. And then you would set the custom data value back to 1.0. Because if you set to 1.0, they become visible again. And that's all it takes basically. So when I want to pick up a stone, I pick it up, moved into my inventory plus 1 stone, and the stone which was right there, still there, just invisible, because I applied the custom data value, which is going to directly mask the underlying mesh, which is right here. Again, let me just show it again. So all I did is I took this value per instance custom data, and then I set it to invisible. And whenever I deal with the item, I set it back to visible. And that's all it takes. And it's way less resource heavy. So in this case, I could just ride through let me turn on my FPS counter. I could just ride through everywhere. I could just pick everything up, I'm not gonna see too much drops, even though I'm literally running through the forest and then I'm just picking up, items, because I just made them invisible, and then once I'm done with it, I make them visible again. Now, of course, depends how resource heavy your inventory script is, because obviously here you need to add the item into your inventory, which is up to you how you do it. In my case, it's with a function, but that's how I kind of deal with it. And of course, there's more to it, because in the beginning, what I do, specifically just a few words, what I do is I scan every single instance foliage. I determine whatever components I have. So I say whatever is swap foliage instance static mesh component. Let's say I have C1, C2, C3, C4. C1 is a, I don't know, stick. C2 is a rock. C3 is mushrooms. C4 is berries. And each of these components have as many instances as they have. And what I do is I loop through it and I determine every single static mesh type that I'm using in my whole level, meaning that I have a static mesh of a stick, static mesh of stone, static mesh of a mushroom, whatever. I loop through it, and I basically loop through my inventory data table, and I do matches, and I make a mapping, and I do arrays, and then I add it to the map, and I take on, like, it gets more complicated, but you can do all kinds of blueprint stuff inside here, whatever you want to. In my case, I loop through my whole forest on whenever the user is loaded in. I get every single, or this server started, whatever you want to do. I get every single static mesh on load. I compare it to my inventory, and I say, make a mapping with these static meshes, give them this inventory item, and whenever the actual stuff happens, which is right here, add pickup items, and then I have this add inventory item, all I do is I find in my mappings, I say this static mesh that we interacted with, we overlapped or whatever, we interacted with it, find the corresponding inventory item and give it to the user. So that's how I do it, but of course your inventory could be different. You could do interfaces right here, and you could communicate from here, from the swap foliage, from this child of the foliage instance static mesh component. You could use interfaces to communicate further back into your inventory. Like, it's up to you how you do your stuff, but good to know that you don't need runtime swapping your interactive foliage into actors. Specific, not talking about trees or rocks. I'm talking about interactive foliage, pickup items, feather, mushrooms, small stuff, sticks, stones. You could theoretically just create a child of a foliage instance static mesh component and build your whole logic here, or go add interfaces and go from here back into your original kind of, you make a whole manager, an actor manager, and you continue your logic there. Up to you how you want to, and you can fully optimize everything. But just, it's easier like this. And also you can just make the item invisible and visible instead of spawning and destroying actors. It's way less resource heavy. I hope I helped someone. That's how I imagined it, and that's how it works. And I can run through my forest 110 FPS. I can pick up, I don't know, 50 items, not gonna overhead it, not gonna have FPS drops. That's how I do it. Hope I helped someone. See you at the next one.